Welcome to our podcast, Chat with Junko and Bola. My name is Ojo-Yoshida, Editor-in-Chief of the Ojo-Yoshida Report. In each episode, we invite a subject matter expert for conversation. We ask probing questions to provide our listeners insight and clarity on the news of the moment.
The last thing I want to acknowledge, though, sometimes in the middle of a crisis, people are going to want to do the blame game. You don't have time to blame. You have to move forward.
So welcome to the Chat with Junko and Bola. Today's guest, it's actually a very special guest, Jackie Erickson, who is usually in the background. Most people don't know who she is, but for a lot of us in the media, she's really the person in the know who can share her insights. And she has helped me a great deal over the years. But I think, Bola, you had the first question to Jackie. So why don't we start?
Right. It's a pleasure to have you here, Jackie. We did some chatting before this recording started. So I'm really fascinated by your background. And also one thing you said earlier on, you said you're a public servant at heart. Yeah. Help us set the stage. Who are you? Who is Jackie Erickson and who has she worked with? Tell us, help us know you.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. But first, before I talk about me, I need to acknowledge the two of you. Huge fans, longtime listener, first-time caller. Like, I am just really thrilled that you brought me on. I have been watching and reading for quite some time. So I want to thank you both for all the work that you've done in the industries to educate and inform us. So thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I guess a little bit about me is that I am a public servant. And the thing that I always kind of come back to is I like really cool technology, but I also want to see it implemented into society safely for this larger, greater good. And a lot of this started in my background when I was in the US Senate for Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. So I ran his Western Pennsylvania office, a very diverse demographic that people who watch presidential elections know very well. And when I was in the Senate, there's so many different things going on, from industries and small businesses and economic development, defense issues. But the thing that really tugged at my heart was the innovation that Carnegie Mellon University was doing in robotics, which was completely random for somebody like myself. I come from a blue collar union family, steel workers. Robotics wasn't something that was in my background. And so when I was in the Senate and I'm looking at all these things, I'm like, this is really cool. And I could see the potential. And so after a number of years of running the senator's office, I decided that I was going to go into this robotics startup space. And that's a good chunk of my career. And I thought at the time, this would be a place where I could carry over my experiences in government. It helped, but I ended up shifting into communications. So I was working with space robotics companies. My first one was here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I got the opportunity to work with Red Whitaker, who is known as like the godfather of field robotics out of Carnegie Mellon University. And that was really fascinating for the time frame of just learning his insights, how he engaged with his students, how he taught, how he engaged with reporters, how he got his message out, kind of what his methodologies and philosophies were. Because if we take a look at the industry today and you look at a number of the companies, a lot of them trace back to Red. And I give Red a lot of credit for a lot of the work that he has done. He really inspired me actually to go and kind of do my own thing. And with his blessing, I ended up going and working for a number of different robotics companies, starting in Pittsburgh, aerial robotics, military robotics, cleaning robotics, going into autonomous vehicle safety, and then shifted into last mile delivery robotics out in San Francisco. And then also doing, ending kind of that stint with low speed shuttles in Boston. But during that time frame, again, it was less about government, more about how do you communicate? How do you communicate your story externally, but how do you communicate it internally? And where I got to know Junko was when I was Senior Director of Communications at Edge Case Research, working alongside our dear friend, Phil Copeman. And for me to have the opportunity to work with somebody like Phil with his expertise in autonomous vehicle and automotive safety and put my comms and policy work together, we can still kind of see that we were able to change, over a number of years, the way that autonomous vehicle safety was, communicated to engineers, to standards bodies, to local, state, city, international governments. And I just want to pause and give Phil so much credit for the work that he has done, even after we no longer work together, for his efforts in advocating for a safe design of this technology. So great job to Phil. But, after leaving the time at Edge Case, I did go to Optimus Ride to go back into government and do public policy at Optimus Ride, which was located in Boston. So I had the experiences of Pittsburgh, San Francisco, and then in Boston, and dealing with the governments again, doing the permits that you hear about for the California DMV, right? What does that look like? The city of Boston, Mass DOT, because we were Boston, fantastic relationships there. That was really fun. Unfortunately, that was short-lived because the company had run out of money and was being acquired, and it was acquired by Magna. And at that time, we didn't know really what was going to happen. But I was fortunate that I was able to go into Magna, into their government affairs department. And over the last few years, working more so on automotive global regulations, whether it's been the electronic side of ADAS features, working with the R&D groups and new mobility groups. I give a shout out to my guys at Magna Electronics, fantastic group of folks out there. They're really great work going on. So I was very fortunate to learn a lot of these ongoing regulations and being able to see where the trends are. So, but it's nice to take a step back, recently off my stint at Magna, and kind of, having the opportunity to talk to you folks is super awesome.
No, that's great. So one of the reasons that we started this conversation was that, so much ink has been spent on the how Cruise kind of dropped the ball in terms of external communications, how it communicates about the safety of robo taxis to the regular people. I felt that was really mismanagement in communications, but that's been already discussed. So set that aside, I thought of Jackie to discuss, what about internal communication? This is really crisis management 101. And, I worked for tech publications for a long time, but I never really had a chance to dig into that, what it's like to be inside the company when your company is in the middle of the turmoil, whether you're an engineer, you're a marketer, it's lots going on, right? So based on your experience, because Jackie, some of the companies you work for, especially when it comes to startups, so there's a lot of ups and downs, and there are times that, there's some of the companies being acquired. So tell us about what you think, what's most important in the internal communication at the time of the crisis, just like the one Cruise most likely is facing right now.
Yes. And I will caveat, I will start off saying, obviously I don't know exactly what is going on inside the walls of Cruise, but, I'm going to take this from the perspectives of, like you mentioned, being in different crises, whether it was my time in the US Senate or within a startup, and what are these components of what happens, right, when this is going on. And let's start with timing. Timing is so critical because in some ways you don't have much time, but the last thing that you want is to having your employees read something on a website or on a tweet, right? If Cruise is saying externally, their goal is to build public trust. That starts internally, right? Starting internal with that trust building, and timing is key. Making sure that the communication that the employees need to know is at an appropriate time. And then as this is happening, making sure whoever your leadership team at the time is that all the C-levels or senior management are in alignment with what that messaging is. Whoever is going to be the spokesperson to deliver the message, they need to make sure that their leadership behind them has their back and believes in what that is. Because if you have a CEO saying one thing, the CMO saying another thing, it's not going to help with the trust building. So alignment is key. Clarity on what your message is. Be very, very clear to your employees. What do you know and what don't you know? And in some cases, it's okay to say if you can't say it, right? But give them some ground truth on what is important at that time, right? And then as you're moving forward, acknowledge as a leader your role. Hold yourself accountable. Again, accountability is a really good characteristic of building trust. I'm going to be held accountable for these parts of moving forward. And I want my employees to see that. I'm going to say it and I'm going to act on it. So holding yourself accountable for whatever those next steps are. The last thing I want to acknowledge, though, sometimes in the middle of a crisis, people are going to want to do the blame game. You don't have time to blame. You have to move forward. What is the plan and move forward? And I would say the last two things that in my experiences that have been really important is making sure your employees have an open line of communication and they know that they can be heard and that they have an opportunity to ask questions, whatever that might be, designating a person, whatever those senior managers are, but having an open line of communication. But in the end, none of this will work unless you are genuine and you are empathetic to what people are feeling at the time of this crisis. The employees need to feel that they're valued, that they're appreciated, and that their team has their back. And so those are the things that, again, I don't know, but it's my hope that whether it's Cruise or another company that might be facing a crisis, these are the things that are really important to keep in mind.
If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of follow up on that. When do you change the messaging? Because sometimes you may just find yourself that what you've communicated internally and externally, things are moving so rapidly that you do need to take some additional steps. When do you change that messaging and how do you communicate it internally and externally?
You know, I would say, again, starting internally, and it's kind of the same process as, again, going back and getting in alignment with your senior management and being open to your staff saying, look, there's a lot of things that are going to change. Like, you have to be adaptable in a crisis situation. You have to acknowledge the team that here's how we're going to communicate when we are changing a message. And so you're going to hear it from, you know, this manager or this part of the team, and this is how we're going to communicate it. So it's okay to change your message, because in the time of a crisis, you might have a playbook coming in, and then you have another situation and you have to completely change your playbook. But this also goes to culture too. The culture of the company is really important because they have to be open to adapting and evolving for whatever that situation might be.
You know, let me ask you this. For example, the Cruise has the stated mission to save people's lives, right? And that was the really supposedly the mission of the company, the goal of the company, value of the company, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the time of crisis, it's not only a good idea, it's essential that, because people inside start asking themselves, what is the mission of this company, right? I mean, it's like, what's the purpose of this company? Why do we exist? Those are kind of questions actually come to surface among employees. How should management respond to that?
Yeah. So, you know, there's two approaches to kind of coming and taking a step back, you know, in the middle of a crisis, right? Is if you come back to what your value is at the time that the company was founded, at that moment, right? And there's only a handful of people who can speak to that probably. What was the intention of that company? And what is the mission moving forward? They can say, you know, again, there's only a few people that can do that, but you go back and you reground yourself and you understand, where am I in this moment? And am I alignment with my original intentions, right? You can do that in the crisis mode because timing is everything. It's a way of regrounding. But I would say once the storm starts to settle a little bit, then you come back and you have another conversation to say, okay, we settled the storm. Here's where we were intending to go. You know, we want to go east, but we're going west, and we need to change the ship around. And so I think a reflection mode is always good once the storm is settled a little bit. But again, in these time of crises, I know for me personally, when you take a step back and you go, why am I here? Here is my intention. And so what is the next best step to move forward in that direction?
I was wondering, Jackie, you could have institutional trauma within a company.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, Cruz suddenly, saying, all right, we're going to stop everything. Maybe not everything internally, but we're not going to be so active on the roads again nationally. And if you're an employee and this is what you've lived your life on for, I don't know how many years, how do you navigate through that? What is the role of the management, in both internally and externally, in helping employees deal with that kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, so, internally, it's really difficult, and I'll do a few different comparisons here is, since I'm in Pittsburgh, we take a look at the Uber ATG, another Uber ATG moment, right? And that was really difficult for a lot of my dear friends who were a part of developing that product. And they would say, here's the role that I played. And there's grief that sets in, right? That's a real thing, because you realize you're not making just an app anymore. You are developing code that's going on a life critical system. Things just got real, right? That's what happened at Uber ATG. Things got real. And so first off, you're thinking, what was the role that I played in this? How did I have an impact? And doing kind of your own self-evaluation. But also, now that things are shifting and changing, and in Cruz's case, pausing operations, what does it mean for the employee? If I'm an employee and I have, and I'm on a visa, what does that mean for me? Right? It's my hope that internally, and I don't know, it's my hope. And I know people at Cruise. I've worked with people at Cruise. I've worked alongside people at Cruise. Those are good people. And my message to be is make sure you have open lines of communication so that, when that information lands, that you have the necessary support system. If you're concerned about your healthcare, your job, when I got the news about the changes at Optimus Ride, that same day, my son broke his leg as wheelchair bound, right? And so how am I going to respond when this just happened in my work life and this just happened in my personal life? Two very important things, right? And so what was, from my experiences, is making sure that the management is there to support, that the team members are there to support, because you're all in it together. My picture here in the background is my son's youth American football. I'll caveat this, American football team. And the thing that I have watched these kids over the last few years of this particular program do is when there is a crisis at hand, they pick each other up and they move forward. And that's what needs to happen internally.
Yeah, is this time to change a coach? I actually love the American football, and I'm a great Packer fan, and we kind of, it's a pastime. Okay, should we change the coach? Should we change the quarterback? And then you start to blame each other, and that's just a professional football, right? We're talking about real life here.
Yeah.
When does the company start looking for a new coach?
So that is, that's the $1 million question. And I can't, everybody can speculate and say,
Sure.
one thing about it. But what I can say based upon my experiences, whether it's been in companies, is that every single person in leadership needs to take a step back, acknowledge the crisis, and acknowledge the role that they play. And are they in a position for themselves, for their capabilities, to move forward with this particular mission, right? I'll give an example, which is probably not an example you'll typically hear, but again, some of these younger youth football folks, they're learning these skill sets right now. And my son's 7th grade football team lost every single football game when he was in 7th grade. He was the quarterback. He goes into the next season and he sits with his coach and he goes, I need to play a better role for my team. Help me find a better position so that I can contribute in an effective way so that we can win. And it wasn't just Ben that did that. Those were other teams. The coaches made fundamental shifts and changes in how they approached the team. The team came together like no other team I had ever seen before. And last year, a year ago yesterday, they ended up going from a losing team to holding the Diocesan Championship trophy under the lights at Duquesne University. And it was literally the most inspiring thing I've ever experienced. Sometimes you need a change a coach. Sometimes you just need a change of a playbook, but really it's the team for them to determine individually, where can I most effectively play the game and play to win.
Jackie, when do you get ahead of the development that you cannot control? So, for instance, Cruz suddenly says, the DMV in California said, we don't want you on the road anymore. And then Cruz said, well, we're going to take the same message nationally. We're not going to wait for another state to say, get off the road. When do you take that step? How do you, as a management, take that decision and communicate it internally? Because I'm putting that on the right of the question that Junko asked you earlier on. When do you change not just the message, but also the specific actions that you're taking for the company?
Yeah, and this goes back to timing again. You have to acknowledge like a timing perspective. You get notice, right, from something like the California DMV that this is happening. Immediately, you're going to need to take a step back and say, okay, what is the landscape looking like across? Now, I can say when something similar happened when I was working in last mile delivery robots, right? So last mile delivery robots were banned from, the sidewalks of San Francisco, and trying to come in there. What's the next step? Looking at the other landscape across. But you have to communicate that to your team very quickly. Again, in a crisis situation, communication needs to be timely. And what do we want to say that in Cruz's situation, that it had about a week, that it seemed to be maybe about a week or so. And as they put it, proactively making these decisions. So they took the time to maybe, again, I'm just making the assumption of, looking across and acknowledging, here are the things that need to be done, or here's the ways that we need to approach moving forward. And taking a pause was the decision that they made to do. Who knows? There could have been other communications going on where, again, in my situation, when I would go into another city, they would say, well, you had all these problems here. How do I know that this isn't going to happen with us? You need to prove to me that this is not going to happen. I had that conversation time and time again, because those cities would call, hypothetically, Dallas or Arlington or Austin would call the city of San Francisco and ask questions. The cities right now, what I have learned over the last few years when it comes to innovation and deploying, they communicate a lot with each other, a lot. So the city of Pittsburgh will make the phone calls, or people will call Pittsburgh. So at this point in time, there might have been some other information coming in where, again, I'm just speculating that maybe there was something else going on where they said, this is going to be a theme. So before this happens again, we're going to get out in front and we're going to make this decision.
Yeah, that's a revelation. Yeah, I didn't think about cities to cities, talk to each other like that. But that totally makes sense, right? I mean, it's yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And your company, if you're running the company, you don't want your company to be yet another headache to the regulators. That's or right. To the citizens in general, right? I mean, they already have enough problems, and you're adding more headache. That is not a good solution, even though you have an admirable, long-term goal to save people's life, but right. It's not going to happen today or tomorrow, even from a year from now, right?
I mean, it's great to be that visionary, but again, in my previous days, when there were issues on the sidewalks, the city of San Francisco would say to me, look, you're the reason why we have to do all these permits. Your company did X, Y, and Z. And I was coming in after the fact. Like, I wasn't there at the time, right?
Yeah.
But I was coming in after the fact, and they were very open with me about, it being a burden. But also acknowledging that, this is innovation. Like, you have to be accepting from the city standpoint, you have to be accepting of when you're bringing new things in, expect some challenges, right? But at this point in time, it was 2018. There was a lot going on. You have a housing crisis, you have job crisis. And right now, you're looking at still the aftermath of COVID. Cities have a lot on their hands. They have minimal budgets and they have minimal time. And so when you're adding things, especially to the public safety side of things, our public safety, they do not have the bandwidth to add on any more crises at hand. So once you start to add more to their plate, it is really challenging. I can say, shifting over to my time of working with the city of Boston, because we had this constant communication going on, right? Very proactively, things were very open. It was very smooth. So there's a difference. There's definitely a difference of approaches. So
the companies in this segment that we're discussing, they are focused on robotics, AVs, things that don't necessarily just come naturally to anybody or everybody. Right. So when you're dealing with all of the very top audiences, including the city that you just mentioned, they don't understand it definitely themselves. The DMV itself doesn't quite get it. Yeah. The employees within the company may get it, but not all of them. So how do you manage all of these different flows of ideas and perceptions and goals? How do you do that?
It's really hard, because you're going to have the cities, and the cities are trying to figure out, what's my role? Do I evaluate the technology? This goes back to like my conversations in 2019 with whether it was PennDOT or NHTSA or what is the role now that you have technology that's coming in that's very new. But at the end of the day, the role of the government is working on their behalf of their constituency. And this is why I come back to my public service. Anytime you go in, or before I was going into any meetings with the government, I would remind my team, this is the role of government, to protect their constituencies and work on their behalf. So whatever that means, whether it's, U.S. Department of Transportation or the city of San Francisco or Pittsburgh or London, it's their job to ensure that the things happening are in the best interest of that constituency. And if they need to communicate things to their constituency of changes of what's happening on the road, like Pittsburgh did, there was a big press conference related to, here are our Pittsburgh principles. Here are the ways that we are expecting autonomous vehicles to act on our roadways. That was very public. The company's committed to doing that. And so that was a very good example of, here's what the city's doing, here's what the companies are doing, and they're committing to doing this together. That doesn't happen everywhere, but there's a lot going on. And honestly, when I was at EdgeCase, this is why Phil and I would get a lot of the calls, because you have a company perspective, you have a government perspective, and you need somebody in the middle that can say, just very objectively, here's what it is. And, and here's how you can move this forward. So when you look at things like a standards-based engineering approach with the safety case, right? That was something revolutionary, I thought, that really was a solution to what they were looking for at the time. So, it takes a lot of different facets of pulling people together, from an industry, from the safety advocates to the companies, with the intention of working together.
Yeah, that's a multifaceted communication. That is really the key here, because if you live in Silicon Valley, and if you only worry about the next funding, that does not come into play, right? Your audience is really your venture capitalists, what they think and how they're ready to fund you for another, I don't know, few more years. It's a different mindset, but it's as this is no longer an R&D project, but these things are actually on the public roads. Public road is not just for the Raymond Cruz. I mean, it's shared by everybody. It's that mindset, public mindset. It's something that I think some of the people in tech community are still learning, in my opinion.
And I think that everybody should at least do an internship in a congressional office. Or some type of local government. If you're going to put something out on the public, into public society, just sit in the shoes of a congressional office for for a little bit of time, and your eyes will be open.
Hold on, Jackie. I have to kind of come in here. You talked about the congressional office. So you want senators and members of the House of Rep talking about this? I mean, they've hardly said anything. Do they even understand what it is they want to talk about?
You're absolutely right, because this is not a space. Well, first off, there are so many things going on in the world right now, right? And the way that I look at it, is this an issue that hits the dining room table of rural America, of, the cities, of, people in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in Greene County, Pennsylvania? No, it's not. What's important right now is, are we safe? There's many issues going on in our communities today, from opioids to guns to so many things. Autonomous vehicles are not what's on fire. And so from a congressional standpoint, they're going to say, look, I got all these bills in front of me. This is cool. And, we can probably get there, but it's mainly not necessarily the priority. I should say for some. Now, if you go into Michigan and you go into other, maybe some other communities, it is priority because, Michigan being and, working for a Michigan company and following their government politics for some time, that is the innovation of their industry moving forward is super important. So that's why you have somebody like Congresswoman Dingell leading the autonomous vehicle caucus, right? And wanting to move things forward. But it may not be the thing that everybody can get behind. There's been an effort to do it, but there's been a lot of, not necessarily understanding the best way to move forward on it. There's also a lot of political divisiveness around it. So.
Very good. Well, this is fascinating. I mean, I've always wanted to actually bring you forward in public face. So this is like my dream comes true. Thank you very much, Jackie.
No, and thank you all. This was a great conversation. I guess the one thing that, I'll close with saying, because I know we're talking a lot about cruise employees, is that, it is my hope, again, noting that, I've known some employees there, that they get what they need and that we're all here to support them as an industry. They're the underdogs right now. We want to see them. They might be coming into a season where they've lost every single game. We want to see them move forward, make good wins, make good decisions, and win a championship game. So it is my hope for all my friends at Cruise that you're getting the support that you need, and know that you have cheerleaders outside on the outside. So
I'm really glad that we had you come on board to give them this message, because everything else is all kinds of javelins and arrows coming from at them from different directions. Yeah. It's good to have somebody say, I've been in your shoes, I know what's going on, and you've got friends in the industry. Thank you, Jackie.
You're very welcome, and thank you both, and keep doing what you're doing. I will continue to read and listen.
All right. So, well, thank you very much. We'll have you back again, okay?